We have a very special guest today. He is the best-selling author and the founder and chairman of the Children's Health Defense and co-counsel of the Monsanto Roundup litigation. From 1986 to 2017, he served as the senior attorney for the Natural Resources Defense Council and was the chief prosecuting attorney for Hudson Riverkeeper. He is also a professor emeritus of environmental law at Pace University School of Law. His latest book, The Real Anthony Fauci, here it is currently number one on the USA Today's book list, also on Amazon.com, but suspiciously number 7 on the New York Times bestseller list, which is weird. Please welcome Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Thanks for being our guest.
Thank you, Jimmy.
So this book is mind-blowing. It's jaw-dropping, all the things I can say about it. You open up to any part of this book and start reading, and I guarantee you it will make you angry about the state of our country and our healthcare system and our culture. So let me just ask you, what made you, now you were personal family friends with Dr. Fauci, correct? What led you to write this book?
Oh, I wouldn't say I was ever personal family friends, but members of my family had interactions with him because my family is so deeply enmeshed in public health in this country because of our, the long-term interest in intellectual disabilities and in other areas and in all kinds of disabilities. So I knew Tony Fauci. I knew of him my whole life. I knew who he was in terms of, I've been on the vaccine issue since 2005. I've watched his villainy in that issue, and I recognize, and the reason I wrote the book, Jimmy, is because so many Americans were looking at Tony Fauci as this kind of savior, this avuncular, science-based, steady hand who had been a health official, public servant for 5 decades, who had advised 6 presidents, and was kind of the guy, the man on the white horse, or the white lab coat, as it were, who would, ride us out of this coronavirus crisis. And I knew from the beginning that this was a case of mistaken identity, that he does not do public health, and he has not done public health since the 1980s. He has transformed that agency into an incubator for pharmaceutical products. His agency, he is the architect of agency capture, not just at NIH or NIAID, but across all of HHS. What they do is they promote pharmaceutical products. They promote the profiteering by the pharmaceutical industry. They promote their own personal power. And he is the leader of that pack. He took that agency, which is supposed to do research on chronic disease and infectious disease, the etiology of those diseases, to figure out what are the environmental causes of those diseases. Why are we in the middle of an epidemic for autism right now, for example? Why is it that autism went from 1 in 10,000 in my generation to 1 in every 34 kids in my children's generation? Why did food allergies suddenly appear in 1989? Peanut allergies that we never heard of and now are ubiquitous. Why did rheumatoid arthritis, juvenile diabetes, and all these autoimmune diseases suddenly go epidemic in 1989? Why did all the neurodevelopmental diseases that we never heard of as a kid, ADD, ADHD, Tourette syndrome, tics, narcolepsy, ASD, sleep disorder, why did they suddenly become ubiquitous? When Tony Fauci came in, 6% of American children had chronic disease. By 2006, 54% had it. We went from being the healthiest country in the world with the healthiest children to the sickest. Literally, we do not even qualify as a developed nation anymore. We are 79th in the world behind Nicaragua and Costa Rica in terms of our health outcomes. And why did that happen? Well, the one figure who is more responsible for that than anybody else in the world is Tony Fauci. He is the reason we take more pharmaceutical drugs than any other nation in the world, 3 times the average in the Western countries. We pay the highest prices and we have the worst health outcomes. And that, is as I show in the book, all of that is at Tony Fauci's door. He has consistently failed upward. If you won't ask Tony Fauci what his greatest success story is, he'll talk about drug promotion. He'll say we developed this vaccine, or we got AZT into 500,000 people. He won't say that human health has increased or deaths have dropped from HIV or anything like that. He will tell you how many drugs that he sold. And he developed drugs instead of using the money, that the $7.6 billion a year budget, more than $500 billion that we've given him in total, instead of using that to determine, what are the environmental exposures that are causing all of these chronic disease outbreaks, he uses that budget to develop new drugs, which he then farms out to the universities, and he shares the patents with them, and then he sells them to the drug companies and splits the patents with them. And he walks those drugs through the FDA approval process, which he completely controls from the bottom up. And then he gets them approved. And then in many cases, he himself profits. People within his agency can collect $150,000 a year from royalties on each of these products. And his agency, for example, in Moderna vaccine, his agency owns half of that vaccine, and they stand to make billions of dollars. 4 of his top deputies, his loyalists, he was able to designate them to get margin rights for the patents. Well, those 4 men will collect $150,000 a year for life from a product they're supposed to be regulating. And what's happened is that the mercantile and commercial interests have overwhelmed the regulatory function at that agency, and it no longer does public health, it does pharmaceutical promotion. I'll tell you one last data point. Between 2009 and 2016, there were 240 new drugs approved by FDA, all of which came out of his shop. He is the incubator for the whole pharmaceutical industry.
And so what's interesting in the book is how the system that is set up to approve these drugs are all under the control of Anthony Fauci. And he has these things called what are PIs. And those are can you explain how that works, or how he farms out?
So here's how he controls science globally. And this is how he was able to maintain this omerta, where every virologist in the world knew that the coronavirus was engineered. All you have to do is look at the genome. Everybody knew that, and they kept silent for a year. And here's how. He gives away $7.6 billion a year. That's 2 or 3 times what Gates gives away. When you take him and Gates, who work tandemly, they partner on everything. They talk together a couple of times a week. They are business partners, and they took a handshake deal, as I show in the book, in 2000 in Gates's library. The 2 of them got together and they formally formed a partnership with each other. But you take those 2 and one other guy, Jeremy Farrar, who is their other de facto partner, who was the head of the Wellcome Trust, which is the UK, the British version of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Between those 3 men, they control 61% of the biomedical research funding on Earth. So if you want to get your study funded, you got to go to those guys. And not only can they give you the money, but they also can kill a study because they control all of the other funding sources. They can kill a study, they can ruin your career, they can bankrupt colleges who do science that they don't want done. So they're able to really dictate virtually all the science on the globe. Here's how it works. This is just a schematic of typically what might happen. Tony Fauci develops a molecule in his lab that kills a virus. He's got in his lab tens of thousands of petri dishes and test tubes that have coronavirus, flu virus, dengue virus, Ebola virus, Zika virus, every virus that might affect human beings. He has scientists who are dropping different molecules on them to see if they kill them. If he finds a molecule that will kill the culture in that petri dish, he then gives it to a rat. And if the rats don't die, now he's got a drug. It's an antiviral that is usable in mammals because it will kill the virus, but it won't kill the mammal. Then he farms it out to the university. He gives it to what they call a PI, or principal investigator. That's usually the dean of the department. It's a powerful guy at the university, at the medical school. He gives that guy does the phase 1 trial. So he's experimenting on animals and probably 100 human beings. For each of the humans that he recruits, he's a medical doctor. He brings in patients, persuades them to take part in this study. Tony Fauci's agency gives him $15,000 for every one of those patients. Yep. The university keeps 50% of that. So now they're also part of this process. And then if the drug gets through that phase 1, then they have to go to phase 2 and phase 3. So now they have to bring in 20,000, 30,000 people. They bring in a drug company as a partner. And they go through the phase 2 and phase 3. And then at the end of it, they all split up the patent. So the drug company owns half. Tony Fauci gets part, his agency may get part of it. He and his cronies can each take little slivers of it. So they get paid for life. The university gets a piece of it. So now you have all the medical schools in the country that are now dependent on this income stream. And I'll tell you where you see the PIs. Turn on CNN any night of the week, and you'll have these people who pretend to be independent experts. It's like Art Kaplan, Stanley Perlman, Peter Hotez, Paul Offit, all of the guys, virtually every one of them are not independent experts. That's what they're posing as. They'll say, they'll tell their university affiliation. What they're not telling you is that virtually all of them are living on Tony Fauci's largesse. So they're getting, in some cases, hundreds of millions of dollars in Tony Fauci. He is financing their careers. Now, when this drug goes to FDA to get it approved, it goes to a panel. Tony Fauci is always saying it's an independent panel who decides, based upon real science, whether or not this drug is worthy of approval. It's not an independent science. They're virtually all his PIs or Gates' PIs. And those guys go sit on that panel for a year, and they know that they've got their own drugs back at Baylor University they're working on, or Berkeley or Columbia, that they know is going to be in front of that same panel next year. And they're all scratching each other's backs. And they approve that drug, and then they go off the panel, finish their drug, and then their drug goes in front of a panel that's similarly constituted and populated. And these PIs control the journals, they control the public debate, they're on TV all over the world, and these are the people that form the narrative, that protect the orthodoxy. If you look at Tony Fauci as the Pope, the PIs are the cardinals and the bishops and the archbishops, and they're the ones that protect the orthodoxy, that make sure that the heretics get burned, that doctors who disagree get hauled up and delicensed, that they get discredited, that they get gaslighted and vilified and marginalized. And they're the army that controls the narrative.
Hey, come see a live stand-up show. We're doing New Year's Eve in Studio City. In January, we'll be in Raleigh, North Carolina. In February, we're going to be in Philadelphia. Go to jimmydorcomedy.com for a link for all our tickets.